Yes. Okay. Hello, I'm Judith Arnold. I'm president of the board of New Jersey Peace Action, and I'm so glad to welcome you to our 65th annual spring event. I am ever hopeful that next year we'll be in person and calling it our annual dinner again, for those of you who remember those. In the meantime, we have Zoom, and I hope you can sit back and enjoy today's program. Please do, refrain from using the chat. If you have a question, you can enter it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, but the chat can be distracting to our speakers, so I ask you not to do that. And now we will begin with the presentation of awards. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peggy Monges, and I'm a member of the board of New Jersey Peace Action. Over the years, let's see, let me just see. Yes, I am on. I have a script taped on a screen, so I can't see it myself. So over the years, New Jersey Peace Action has given an award annually to a person or persons of the year for their continued efforts to give peace and justice a more prominent place in our world. About 20 years ago, we discovered we had a young artist in our midst whose work was clearly aimed at making a statement for peace in a time of unrest. We asked him to create the 2002 Dinner Journal cover, and he did, to rave reviews. Since then, Johnny Keene has done the artwork for most of our journal covers. For most of us, while we love them all, the 2020 cover, I'm sorry, am I audible? It says to unmute myself. Okay. While we love them all, the 2020 cover of the tiger is our favorite. You can click on the link to the journal, which will be in your chat window later, to see that cover and others. For his work helping New Jersey Peace Action produce a dinner journal that is both an artistic success as well as a historic document, I am proud to present Johnny Keene with this year's Person of the Year Award, which says New Jersey Peace Action Person of the Year Award 2022. This award is presented to Johnny Keene for using his artistic creativity to inspire a more peaceful and just world. And this is going to be signed by me, President of the New Jersey Peace Action Education Fund, and Judith Arnold, President of New Jersey Peace Action. Johnny, I'm really happy to give this to you today.
Okay, I guess just say a couple of words. So the first thing I would say is this is not coming out of false humility, but I truly believe that this is, I'm accepting this because, I mean, I'm proud of the fact that I can contribute something towards peace and nonviolence and against, a war. But I say this without any, without any sense of false humility. I really mean this. Is when I think of New Jersey Peace Action, I think of all the faces that I see right now in Zoom. And it really is a team effort. It's a community. It's a family. And that's what moves me the most. And the fact that everyone's so passionate, it's contagious, the passion. And even during the struggle, there's moments of joy and real commitment. And, the faces of Judith, Anna, Peggy. I have to mention Madeline Vercella was always someone I could, lean on for support. Howard, Lev, Virginia. I don't even have these names written down. I just, and former director Madeline Hoffman was my connection to New Jersey Peace Action, and through social media and text and phone calls every once in a while, still keep in touch with her. So, they're the guiding lights and inspiration for me. the only other thing I would say is I just have some random things I'm paraphrasing here. Just that, you know, it says New Jersey Peace Action, and I think what I've contributed has been very good, but now I'm ready to do the action part of it and do more than just draw and contribute art. It's important, but I'd like to go beyond that. And, you know, mostly because I believe a lot of what I'm reading here, I'm going to read here is, you know, because this is a moment of deep urgency. And this, you know, I've always felt a moment of urgency before that, but, you know, and as Martin Luther King said, the choice is no longer between violence and, you know, actually he said the choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. The choice is nonviolence or non-existence. And, you know, that's what motivates me every day to do something, or to do something, whether at work or something to promote nonviolence. And and just the last thing I would say is in the bio, I think it mentions how Father John Deere was an influence on me. And I'm paraphrasing, but I would encourage everyone to practice the 3 attributes of nonviolence, which is, number 1, be nonviolence towards ourselves. Find more peace within ourselves. That would be the first goal. The second goal is to be nonviolent with all people around you. Reconcile, face those people who you have conflicts with, and work towards peace and nonviolence with them. And the last, of course, is what New Jersey Peace Action is all about, and that's join a global grassroots movement of nonviolence. I think it's essential, not only from a grassroots level, but a personal level. So if we get through those 3 steps, those 3 attributes, I really think that we can change the world, and you know, and always be seekers of truth. That's what I hope to get at when I do the artwork, is to be a seeker of truth. And I think that's very important, especially in these days where it's hard to decipher what's true or not, especially if it's being, you know, projected by corporate interests. And the very, very last thing I will say is I just have something to read real quick. It's not even that long. I'm quoting here. Instead of sitting, this is a quote from a cartoonist, instead of sitting back and letting the best minds in government, science, economics, and engineering be architects of modern civilization, they should have worked harder, or we should work harder to make sure it was the best hearts in art, that is, the best hearts in art, poetry, and music, and independent journalism and community-led activism to give us a life worth living. So I believe it's the artists, not just because I'm an artist, the poets, the music, the independent journalists, and the community-led activists that can give us a life worth living. And I am deeply honored and humbled that I get to work around people like you. If people think, oh, I want to meet somebody famous. I don't want to meet anybody famous. I've met the people I want to meet. And those are the people from New Jersey Peace Action. Those are the people I'm in awe of and honored. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Johnny.
Hello, I think I'm unmute.
Yep, you're all good.
You can hear me all now? I guess,
Yes.
right? Okay. My name is Jane Califf, and I am a member of New Jersey Peace Action. And today I have the honor of presenting an award to Veterans for Peace, Chapter 21, Northern New Jersey. But first, I would like to give you some important background information about this important organization. So here goes. Veterans for Peace is a global organization of military veterans who promote peace and try to help heal the wounds of war by using their experiences to inform the public of its true causes and enormous costs. It was founded in 1985 in response to the nuclear arms race and US interventions in Central America, and now has over 140 chapters in every state and several foreign countries, including Vietnam, Japan, Ireland, Okinawa, and Spain. It also includes veterans of the Israel Defense Forces, South Korean Army, and Iranian Air Force. Chapter 21, Northern New Jersey, that we are honoring today, spans the width of the state as far south as Toms River. It has about 60 active members, including veterans of the US military during a whole lot of wars: the Korean War, the Cold War, Gulf Wars, Vietnam War, Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and also members who took part in the US interventions in the Dominican Republic in 1965 and Somalia in 1992. Chapter 21 in Northern New Jersey's proud history of peace and justice activism has included anti-nuke mobilizations, support for Central American struggles, joining the successful international movement to stop the US Navy's 60-year use of the inhabited island of Vieques, Puerto Rico for bombing practice. It has also has advocated for the closure of US military bases in Okinawa and elsewhere, and has shown solidarity with Palestine and has supported racial justice. And to end my introduction to this wonderful group, their activities this year so far have included a Black History Month display in Jersey City done jointly with a local VFW post, participation in the TNEC Peace Vigil on March 2nd to express opposition to the war in Ukraine and NATO, joining the rally on March 5th in Times Square against the war on Ukraine, marching in the inclusive St. Patrick's Day for All parade in Queens on March 6th, and supporting the People's Organization for Progress in Newark on April 4th to march for voting rights, racial and social equality, economic justice, and peace on the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And now, Michael Kramer, president of this organization, will accept the award. And this is what the award says. New Jersey Peace Action honors Veterans for Peace, Chapter 21, Northern New Jersey, with the Sylvia and Oscar Acklesburg Peace Award for their steadfast activism to reveal the truth of the causes of war and its devastating costs on this day, April 24th, 2022. So now it's Michael Kramer's turn.
Well, thank you so much, Jane and other members. Jane, I think you read my notes. You covered so much of what I was planning to say.
Oh, okay.
But let me say this.
You can say it again.
Well, it is an honor to receive the Sylvian Oscar Acklesburg Award. And we crossed paths with Sylvia Acklesburg. I did a little research, and back in 1993, too many wars ago, one of our founding members, Dave Klein, and Sylvia Acklesburg were both plaintiffs in a court case in the state of New Jersey over the issue of the freedom to distribute political literature in indoor malls. And so working with Sylvia continues. It is an honor to receive it in her name. Thanks for that description of our chapter. As you said, we're very large geographically. We go from the Delaware River to the Hudson River, and from the Raritan River in central New Jersey up to the New York-New Jersey state line. Our members are in Hoboken, Jersey City, Teaneck, Bergenfield, Morristown, Belleville, Fairlawn, Clifton, Bloomfield, Phillipsburg, Hackensack. So what this means is you may not, when you run into us, unless you come to one of our annual dinners, which we, like you, haven't had for a few years, you won't run into the whole chapter. you'll run into individual members or smaller groups of us, 2s or 3s. But all of us do our work in our respective communities. As you said, we're veterans of not only the US military, but our particular chapter has veterans of the South Korean armed forces, Israeli Defense Forces, and Iranian Air Force. We're draftees, we're volunteers, we're former officers, enlisted. Some of us are West Point graduates, others are Naval ROTC graduates. So we do run the gamut of what a veteran is. And most recently, just yesterday, we were focused on the issue of peace in Korea. And our members took part in a very important rally, march, solidarity chain of holding hands with the Korean community. Their issue is, let me put a plug in it for it. Their issue is the unification of Korea under peaceful means. And we wholeheartedly embrace their struggle and call for the US to sign a peace treaty and to end the war, which is still an active war with the truce. On Ukraine, we know there are many narratives, counter narratives, some overlap. We can have overlapping narratives that are both valid. But we focus on who's making the money off this war and the amount of weapons that are going into the war from the United States and from NATO that are just fueling the situation. We also focus on violence at home, whether it's violence, police violence targeting the Black community. And we have taken part in actions with our allies in Newark, wonderful organization. We all know the People's Organization for Progress. And we also focus on anti-Asian violence, more than a growing threat, an everyday threat for every Asian person in the United States who steps out of their house. We're also involved in high school programs, whether they're educational on a specific topic. Most recently, we conducted programs on Guantanamo and also programs that focus on counter-recruitment. So we're always busy. We've worked so long with New Jersey Peace Action, and we thank you so much for this award.
Okay, I'm back. Judith Arnold, for those of you who came in later, I'm president of the Board of New Jersey Peace Action, and I'm here to do our year in review. And I don't have to tell you what a crazy year it's been. From Afghanistan to Syria to Yemen to Palestine to Ukraine, New Jersey Peace Action has been working tirelessly on many fronts. To give you a rundown, we've taken part in virtual lobby visits with senators and representatives. In June, we met with the staff of Representative Payne to discuss an array of issues, including endless wars, Pentagon spending, and reducing the military threat. On December 1st, we met with Senator Booker's staff to talk about Afghanistan, abolishing nuclear weapons, Yemen, the Pentagon budget, Palestine, and the vote on the NDAA. More recently, we've teamed up with Coalition for Peace Action and the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, for virtual meetings with both the Booker and Menendez staffs and with Representative Malinowski's staff to encourage them to support a return to the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement. Our political activism committee is actively working on the Back from the Brink campaign. It's a 5-point plan to abolish nuclear weapons. And you can see in the journal information about the campaign and how you can be part of it, as well as other ways to be involved with our work. I'm sure you have all heard about the webinars. They're coming into our inboxes all the time. New Jersey Peace Action has taken part in many, including co-sponsoring the webinar series in July on Palestinian liberation as part of a coalition to support Palestinian liberation. We also co-sponsored with 350nj.org Rockland in March a presentation by Veterans for Peace on militarism and the environment. Our social media presence has been increased over the past year, thanks to Adam Hockenberry, particularly on Twitter, getting the word out farther about our activities. We have held special vigils at our Vigil Corner in Montclair, one in remembrance of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August, one in February dedicated to support the people of Afghanistan, and most recently, an anti-war Ukraine vigil, and a vigil to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We are now back to vigiling every Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. at the corner of Bloomfield Avenue between Church and South Fullerton Streets in Montclair. We hope you will join us. Other vigils taking place in our area are in Leonia, Morristown, Weehawken, and Teaneck. In October, we got back to tabling at the Hoboken Arts Festival, and we'll be there again on May 1st if you're available to join us for this really wonderful event. Many of our members have become acquainted with and joined NJPA at tabling events, and we're hoping that after the pause for COVID, many more tabling opportunities will once again reopen this year. Lots more information can be found in our journal. If you go to njpeaceaction.org and click on About, it will take you to the journal. And of course, you will all receive a paper copy just for signing up for today's event. Ending on a positive note, after a year without an executive director, we're excited to have a new person starting on June 1st, and we will be introducing our new director soon. We thank Adam Hockenberry, who has served as Director of Outreach, for all the work he has done for us and wish him well in his future work for peace. There have been marches and webinars and meetings. It's been a trying year for us all, and I'm just hopeful that the news in the coming year will take a positive turn. Thank you.
Hello, it's wonderful to greet everyone today. I'm Howard Lipoff. I am the treasurer of New Jersey Peace Action. And I want to especially welcome the first-time attenders to a New Jersey Peace Action event. You've just heard from Judith about our work this past year. We've accomplished a lot, constantly readjusting to COVID times, improvising, and having managed to keep our doors open. Many grassroots organizations have had to close down, but we are still here. We've met with Congress members, we've vigiled, we've partnered with new organizations. The board and staff has been working extremely hard. There are so many ways to work for a better world. I will tell you a few ways to support New Jersey Peace Action financially. Then David Swanson will speak. Thank you to all who are making ongoing contributions. You all make our work possible. I'm urging everyone to make some additional contributions. After 3 years of online fundraising events like the one we're having right now, we are just not raising money at the same level as before the pandemic. We know that online events are not the same as in-person events. We can't build the camaraderie and the enthusiasm. We don't hug our old friends and welcome new folks. We are not sharing a meal, enjoying the posters, the books, and buttons for sale by Donnelly Coat. However, we need your financial support now more than ever. What I really want to ask is for a few of you to write checks for $1,000 and a few for $500. Maybe some of you can. But we know many of our supporters are of modest means, and perhaps an extra $50 or $100 or $20 is what you can give. Please give it. Our spring goal is to raise $25,000 by mid-June, by the time spring ends and summer begins. We have been working hard and are committed to helping the citizens of Ukraine, Afghanistan, Yemen, and other countries lead peaceful lives. Challenged as we are also fortunate and privileged that we have a sustainer program. Thank you to our current sustainers who give monthly or quarterly. I want to encourage and urge all of you to please join this program. Whether you can give $50 a quarter, and I know that is a lot, or $50 a quarter, or $15 a quarter, or $15 a month, it will be a huge difference. One of our monthly sustainers gives $150 a month, and some give $7 a month. You choose the amount, and we can do more activism. Now, some of you have bought your ticket, and that is what you're able to donate. We thank all of you for already giving by purchasing a ticket to this event today. Adam will post the link in the chat section. It will take you to our website to donate. Please take a moment now to make a gift, or because I know you want to hear David Swanson speak, do it immediately after the program. Join us in showing support and encouragement for the next generation of peace activists. I am now turning the screen over. I guess Adam will turn the screen over to Virginia Ahern, our chairperson of the fundraising committee.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all. I'm not going to talk more about fundraising, however, although I underscore everything that Howard said. Right after this meeting, or a few minutes after this event finishes, we're going to have a short organizing meeting and discussion. So you can hear more about upcoming events, how you can get involved, and you can share your feedback. And I will be facilitating that meeting. And we urgently need you all to jump in and get involved with things. We sent a separate Zoom link yesterday for this meeting. Adam is going to post it again in either both the chat or the question and answer section, but he will post it so that if you didn't see the email yesterday with that separate Zoom link, you can cut and paste it, open a new browser, paste it into the new browser, and join us after this event ends. And of course, after you go to the website and make a contribution. And let's see. I'll also post my phone number in the chat so that if you continue to have problems with the Zoom link, you can call me and I can send it to you. The reason that we're not just going to continue this discussion or to continue this on the same Zoom link here is because this next meeting is set up as a meeting, not a webinar. We will all be able to see each other on the screen. It'll be about 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I hope that you can join us. Thank you all so much.
Adam, I'm up. Hello, David. Adam. Thank you. Okay, we'll get to David in a minute, but first, I am pleased to present to you our speaker for this afternoon, David Sanson. David is a full-time peace activist who in 2014 co-founded World Beyond War, a global nonviolent movement to end war and establish a just and sustainable peace. He serves there as executive director. David has also written several books, including War is a Lie, When the World Outlawed War, 20 Dictators Currently Supported by the US, Leaving World War II Behind, and A Global Security System, an Alternative to War. If you're interested in any of David's books, perhaps he can tell you how to reach him and get copies. His peacemaking has been recognized with the 2018 Peace Prize from the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation and the Beacon of Peace Award from the Eisenhower Chapter of Veterans for Peace in 2011. He received a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. David, I'm honored to present to you today the Dorothy Eldridge Peacemaker Award, named for our first executive director. And the certificate reads, New Jersey Peace Action bestows upon David Sanson the Dorothy Eldridge Peacemaker Award for his leadership and lifetime commitment to ending war and establishing a world beyond war, April 24th, 2022. There will be a question and answer period following David's presentation, and please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Is that my cue? Okay. Thank you, Judith. I see you're now muted and I'm unmuted. Let me know, everybody, if you can hear me okay. Thank you so very much for the incredible honor of that award and for all the work that I've been aware of New Jersey Peace Action and many of the individuals here and discussed doing for years and years, although I don't go quite back to the beginning as far as New Jersey Peace Action does. I want to try sharing screen. I'm setting myself a little timer here and setting up a slideshow that I hope you'll be able to see. And I want to I want to start by saying, quoting something that a friend of many of ours, Kathy Kelly, who recently became the president of our board at World Beyond War, has been quoting recently, and that is the need to not be a vegetarian just between meals, or to be a pacifist or an advocate for peace just between wars, or just between wars that are on television, because apparently it is extremely rare to be for peace when there is a war on television. And so I applaud you all for still being for peace in this moment. And congratulations to the other recipients. Not mentioned in my bio was that I'm an advisory board member of Veterans for Peace. And so I'm thrilled to see them get the New Jersey chapter thereof get an award. And as far as my books, there's another downside on top of not shaking hands and giving hugs, is I don't sell a pile of books from a table, but you can buy my books at any local bookstore that sells books or anywhere online that sells books, or davidswanson.org/books. See if I can get to the next slide. So I want to broaden how we think about and talk about and write letters to the editor about the war in Ukraine. I have people, I had a professor at the University of Virginia during an event a few days ago, tell me it's the people of Ukraine's democratic right to favor continued war and oppose negotiations. And it's not up to you or me or Vladimir Putin or anybody else in the world. It's up to the people of Ukraine. And if they don't want peace and they don't want to negotiate with a reincarnated Hitler, it's their choice to continue with war. One problem with that is how do you poll and find out the choice of a public where millions of people have left the country and millions of people due to their age and sex are forbidden to leave the country, and free speech is not exactly thriving, and find out what they think. Another problem is the impact is much, much more widespread than any little corner of the world. We've always known that military budgets, by diverting funds from where they needed, kill more people than the wars, and that this will be true until the wars become nuclear. And of course, that it is militaries and wars that create the risk of nuclear apocalypse. But even the famines generated specifically by particular wars tend to kill more than those wars. And there is famine looming if a ceasefire is not in place soon, if negotiations aren't underway soon, and if crops are not planted in Ukraine. There are people who point back to the drought in 2010 in Ukraine as a source of suffering and unrest and the Arab Spring. So we also have to start getting the U.S. public and the U.S. government to think about aid and the well-being of the world outside of weapons. The United States, rather uniquely, treats in what it calls its total dollar figure for foreign aid, about 40% of it as weapons. We have, I don't know what's democratic small d about this, but we have billions of dollars of U.S. weapons sitting in a pile with the U.S. president free to decide to grab some hundreds of millions of dollars worth more and send them off to Ukraine, apparently every few days. Apparently to defend democracy. And this is called aid. It's not called, giving away your money in the form of deadly weapons without you having any say so. And so we need to look at aid to Ukraine in conjunction with ceasing to steal money from Afghanistan, ceasing to participate in the starvation of the people of Yemen, and ceasing to risk widespread famine of people who will be of far less interest for various reasons to Western corporate media outlets than the people of Ukraine are. We also have to look at the question of nuclear apocalypse, which, just doesn't impact one little corner of the world, no matter who gets it started. There was a poll recently where about 70% of people in the United States were concerned that this war in Ukraine might lead to nuclear war. There was apparently no follow-up question as to whether that was a good thing or a bad thing or a slightly dangerous thing. So it's hard to know exactly what it means. But we do know that virtually none of that 70%, perhaps 1% at the most, have done anything about it, have demanded better policies from their government or any institution globally or abroad. And I think most people have been convinced that they're powerless, which is, would be funny if it weren't so tragic. Most people have been convinced that you can have a nuclear war in one part of the world on what people fantasize exists and refer to all the time as a battlefield, and that humanity can survive such a thing, that a nuclear winter doesn't create starvation globally. as well as believing that the moral thing to do in a time of war is to cast aside all morality and do whatever you can to destroy the evil enemy, individual responsible for all ill in the world, even if it kills the rest of us too. And I think people don't know how many times we have come within inches of nuclear apocalypse, many of those times through accident, or how many times the US or Russian or other governments have threatened the use of nuclear weapons. I think, we're in a moment where most people are exposed either to very, very partisan pro-US media, pro-Ukrainian government media, or very, very partisan pro-Russian media, or both, but almost none independently noting that the United States and Russia have 90% of the nukes, use the vast majority of the vetoes in the UN Security Council, are the leading abstainers from and violators of treaties on human rights and disarmament, sell the vast majority of the weapons, these two countries, to the rest of the world, are leading rogue states that the rest of the world should not be putting up with. This seems a moment for that perspective, but it's not to be found. Also extending beyond the borders of Ukraine, the impact on the climate of the earth. Not only do the militaries and the war and the hundreds of millions of dollars of new weapons every few days now take the money that's needed for an all-out emergency, if it's not too late, effort to protect the livability of the planet. But the militaries and the wars, well known, of course, to all of you, but little known to most people, are huge contributors to the destruction of the climate and the earth. And the number one principal reason that governments can't cooperate with each other when they need to. And so we aren't going to just have the suffering created by the disruption of fossil fuels from this war. We also already have, new reports by scientists gluing themselves to buildings and demanding that you read their reports, blatantly ignored by the US government, replacing such concerns with a celebration of releasing oil reserves and shipping more fossil fuels to Europe, because apparently it's Russian fossil fuels that harm the earth, not fossil fuels in general. A lot of us have spent years, more than years, decades, wanting war victims to be treated with sympathy, wanting it to be reported what war actually looks like, and that civilians are those principally impacted. And we finally have that, but we have it only for Ukraine. It wasn't switched on for Ukraine plus Yemen plus Afghanistan, et cetera. And so the question is, these two images are, the first stories that come up for me on Google News when I search for Ukraine war or Yemen war. One shows civilians in Ukraine and buildings being blown up. The other explains the need and the motivation for the war on Yemen, and shows the armed forces in Yemen, as if a bomb could somehow land just on those guys. And so the question is, can we expand it? Can we find openings in people's minds and in independent media and in letters to the editor to say, thank you for covering what war really looks like. Did you know there are other wars? Thank you for painting everything blue and yellow, but what's wrong with the colors of the flag of Yemen? Does anyone even know what they are? And so continuing on the theme of what's wrong with the United States and Russia and what do they have in common other than the resentment and criticism of some of the smartest people in Ukraine who resent being caught between them. What I've written on this slide, I think bears repeating, that it's an absolutely phenomenal accomplishment of communications, of propaganda that, and as was mentioned in my introduction, I wrote a book called 20 Dictators Currently Supported by the US Government. The United States government arms, funds, supports, stands up for almost all of the most oppressive governments on the planet by its own ranking of those governments. And yet almost nobody in the United States knows that. In fact, most people in the United States imagine the US government is dead set on doing everything it can to oppose, and typically with violence, to oppose dictatorship and to stand up for democracy. It's an absolutely incredible feat. I at this event I did a few days ago at the University of Virginia with this history professor there, he happened to blurt out that he just wished, he really wished that all world events and everything on Earth could be decided by the United States. And he didn't mean anything imperialistic. He wasn't power driven. He didn't mean anything cruel. He actually imagined that meant peace and happiness and prosperity for all, but without a passing thought, apparently, for how 96% of humanity might hear such a remark, or why major pollsters like Gallup find the US at the top in most countries when they ask people, what's the biggest threat to peace on Earth? And so we need to take this moment to figure out how, with less hypocrisy and more actual democracy, the world can move in the direction of strengthening, not just abusing, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, treaties, the rule of law, etc., to tear down the International Criminal Court year after year, to punish nations for supporting it, to sanction its top individual staff, to which it took several months of us screaming to get undone after Biden became president, to put an end to the investigation of Afghanistan, or rather to limit it to the crimes of anyone other than the US or NATO, to block the progress of an investigation into Palestine, to allow prosecutions only of Africans and now Russians. This is not a good way to strengthen international law. And the hypocrisy and the victor's justice program is so blatant. I mean, you can, if you do web searches and track the demands for prosecution of Russia for using cluster bombs in Ukraine, up until the moment that the Western media starts reporting that Ukraine is also using cluster bombs on Ukraine, and then the silence that follows. I mean, this is, following the model of the post-World War II trials. You're going to have to find crimes that the victors didn't commit and prosecute those by the losers. And there may not be any unless it's the crime of aggression, unless you can pin starting the war on one side. And that would be a breakthrough to finally have the crime of starting a war prosecuted. But if you had an independent, legitimate, serious, honest court ready to prosecute the crimes of both sides, even when one side's vastly more significant than the other, and increasingly so as the crimes mount, well, then you would have a motivation to end wars, rather than the idea that you can read in your local newspapers today that there must be no negotiated end to the war because that would prevent prosecuting the war criminals, which of course is not true. Things that we can do. We can send aid. Everybody's doing it. More of it's needed. Governments should be doing it, and it shouldn't mean weapons. We can support peace. We can do educational and organizing work, and I know that you are, and I'll talk more about those. But we can also demand things of the U.S. government as people who favor peace. We can demand no to a no-fly zone, for goodness sake. I mean, here's one where the polling companies polled the U.S. public and everybody wants a no-fly zone. And then to their great credit, took the unusual step of telling people what a no-fly zone is, and then found that much fewer people, far from a majority of people, support a no-fly zone. Because of course it's war between nuclear governments, something with a possible limited exception of Pakistan and India, you haven't seen before, and we don't want to see, and it's absolute insanity to be risking. And the notion of going ahead and risking it again, adding more nations in Finland and Sweden and elsewhere to NATO, despite the war threats from Russia, it's just madness. We can demand a declaration of no nuclear weapons use. The United States and Russia have first use policies, and they have missiles armed and ready to go in seconds, unlike some other countries like China. We can demand no more weapons shipments. We can demand that Ukraine be empowered to negotiate an end to U.S. sanctions on Russia. This ought to be easy to demand. Everyone wants to empower Ukraine. We can push for a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement and demand that the United States stop blocking those and stop talking seriously or slipping off script or following on the reports written in recent years by groups like the Rand Corporation and the way that the USAID folks are still talking to this day about the need to overthrow the Russian government. This is madness. I mean, both sides need to stop fantasizing about an all-out victory and need to stop thinking about overthrowing governments and stop expanding NATO. This is a strange situation because, as you know, friends in Ukraine will tell you, Russia, like most governments on earth, is a horrible government, and it's militaristic and it's aggressive and it's imperialistic, and it didn't need a reason to invade Ukraine. It needed an excuse to invade Ukraine. And yet there was no sensible reason to give it that excuse. You know, when you have thousands of informed people, and people including the current director of the CIA, who would never say it now, but said it some years back, diplomats like George Kennan on down, endless authorities and experts and commentators for years and years and years saying that expanding NATO and putting weapons into Eastern Europe and putting military rehearsals, exercises into Eastern Europe, you're going to get a war with Russia. They didn't mean because if you didn't do those things, Russia would be Costa Rica or Russia would be a benevolent philanthropic institution. They meant that Russia wouldn't have any good excuse, that it could sell to its military and its elites and its public and half the world for invading Ukraine. And so we need to stop oversimplifying things and recognizing that wars have multiple causes and multiple ways to start them and end them, and multiple people at fault, and that rather painfully obvious observation does not, of course, mean the silly thing that everyone who is at fault is equally at fault. But Russia could have not invaded. Europe could have not allowed this ongoing struggle for years and years between Russia and the US/NATO. And the US could have not engaged in all of these actions that it knew were likely to lead to this outcome. You had Russia talking about Ukraine being neutral years ago, including 2014, and the United States supporting a coup. You had President Obama, a guy willing to bomb 7 countries simultaneously, not exactly a member of New Jersey Peace Action, saying it would be crazy to send weapons to Ukraine. You had to have Trump and then Biden to do it. Instead, you could be supporting nonviolent action, unarmed resistance, neutrality. I had this same professor I spoke with this past week at an event say that the only reason that Russia hasn't invaded the Baltic states is because of membership in NATO. And there seems to be just a complete erasure of how those states got Russia out of them, right? Because they got the USSR out of them when it still existed, without being members of NATO, without having or using militaries, through nonviolent action, through the Singing Revolution. So you should watch the wonderful movie called The Singing Revolution if you haven't. But this is actual events in history. The notion that NATO has kept Russia out of anywhere is by definition speculative. We don't know. But transitioning from fossil fuels would have helped. Supporting Zelensky when he was elected on a platform of recognizing the Minsk II agreements and the autonomy of the Donbass regions, instead of opposing that, refraining from all the armament shipments and war rehearsals, accepting Russia's absolutely perfectly reasonable demands from months before the invasion, which were identical to the US demands when the Soviets had missiles in Cuba, and refraining from supporting the dramatic increase in the firing from the Ukrainian side on the Donbass region immediately preceding the Russian invasion. All of these things were perfectly possible alternatives. So would have been things that seem absolutely crazy because of the financial cost. Either the US or Russia for a fraction of military spending, even though Russia spends 8% what the US does, for a fraction of that. Either of these sides could have turned Ukraine into the best place on earth to live, the most prosperous, environmentally sustainable, could have done away with the pipelines and made it the prize star demonstration, a World's Fair country demonstrating fossil-free, sustainable energy. These things are not impossible, and they don't cost what militarism costs. They just don't have the political will that militarism has. But, as with any war, everyone always wants to turn their time machine back right to the moment when it's too late to prevent it and say, but what now do we do? Nobody's ever willing to turn it back a month earlier in their imagination and do anything to prevent the war. So what do you do? Not because we actually have time machines, but because this is the conversation that thou must have with anyone who owns a television. Well, you don't work to create that situation, but once it's created, you don't resist it with its mirror image of more militarism. You look at the evidence of what works, and so the people doing nonviolent action in Ukraine and accomplishing amazing things with a handful of unorganized people, stopping tanks and moving soldiers out of squares and so forth, are doing what, if it were engaged in on the scale that the militarism is being engaged in, would have a better chance of succeeding, according to the studies that I know many of you must be familiar with, by Erica Chenoweth and others, looking at the past century of principally violent and nonviolent campaigns and seeing that they both often fail, but the nonviolent ones succeed at over twice the rate and are almost always far longer lasting settlements. And so what do you do once the violence is raging and you haven't put in place a plan for unarmed civilian resistance the way Lithuania has? What do you do as a government that knows only violence? Well, you negotiate an end to the violence. And that means being willing to sit down and settle things in a way where everybody's going to be partially happy and partially unhappy, and stand by it. And even what's been discussed of putting some of the key decisions off for years, but making others and putting in place a ceasefire. This is a sane policy. Risking nuclear war is not a sane policy. And of course, in general, supporting the rule of law and disarmament and cooperation, as discussed earlier, would help tremendously. And remembering the history of what the Baltic states did to get the Soviets out would help tremendously. Here's a friend of ours who's been doing nonstop webinars. I'm sure you've seen him or met him in recent months. Every peace group in the world. He's a peace activist in Kiev, Ukraine, who's on the board of World Beyond War. But his organization opposes war, even in the midst of a war, and opposes both sides and denounces the atrocities of both sides with perfect honesty and objectivity. And I think that's deserving of enormous praise, because without Ukrainians doing that, anything anyone with a bit of sanity says anywhere else on earth is immediately rejected. Well, that's easy for you to say at your desk, right? You find someone in Ukraine to say that. Well, there are people in Ukraine, thank goodness, saying it, and I hope they are able to survive and keep saying it. In terms of education, just to briefly show you an overview of what we try to educate people about through World Beyond War, we try to go after these myths of war's inevitability, war's justification, war's necessity, war's beneficial impact, and we encourage your comments and criticisms if there's anything, any argument we haven't completely dismantled to the that's failed to persuade anyone you know or yourself. Please tell us, and then we argue several reasons in sections of our website for ending war, including the immorality which motivated many of us in the first place, but also including the wasting of $2 trillion, which this is, rough global military spending a year, 2 trillion, US 1 trillion, which, as mentioned earlier, actually kills more people than the wars. So it's not separate from morality. But also the overwhelming evidence that war endangers more than it protects, that the absence of nuclear weapons from Ukraine is blamed by so many people for the war. And yet it was putting missiles capable of firing nuclear weapons closer than ever before to the borders of Russia. That's also widely blamed for provoking the war. And of course, the biggest war makers in the world generate the greatest number of enemies and threats in a sort of self-perpetuating cycle. There's so many examples back in the previous Cold War, some of them discussed in Andrew Coburn's latest book, of the Soviets and the US military rather helpfully creating little minor incidents in the news just when the other side was busy trying to get more funding out of its government for weapons. Well, you see echoes of that here. I mean, what Russia has just done for NATO, NATO could never have done for itself if given centuries to work on it. And what NATO has done for the Russian military establishment, nothing in Russia could have done ever. So this series of arguments, the threat to the environment, the erosion of civil liberties, which you see now in Russia and in Ukraine, but of course ongoing in the perpetually war-making United States, the impoverishment rather than the jobs program that people sell war as a jobs program, which sounds sociopathic, but it's also false. The promotion of bigotry, the racist violence that you see during and after wars historically in this and other countries, and the fact that there are alternatives, that there are alternative tools for addressing crises in person, head on, unarmed, and for establishing cooperation and the rule of law and nonviolent resolution. So World Beyond War actually has chapters and affiliates all over the world, and wonderful groups like yours can be an affiliate if they want and work more closely together and share resources and promote each other's work. We also have book clubs and online courses and all sorts of resources. We also, on our own and with other organizations, put up billboards, and we have a kit for making the most out of these billboards in terms of getting media and organizing events and signing people up and educating around the statements that we put on the billboards. I'm sure you do this as well. We also encourage putting messages of peace on T-shirts and hats and wearing them around. And I can't tell you in recent weeks and months how many times I've just been rather despairing at the seemingly universal support for war making that I run into on the internet and Zoom, and then going out and walking around wearing a shirt that says something like, "I'm already against the next war," and having dozens of random people say, "Oh yeah, me too. I like your shirt. Hey, where do I get that shirt?" If you need cheering up, I recommend not hiding your support for peace, but showing it prominently, and you'll be surprised. We also work on divestment campaigns, which we find organize, educate, and give people a relatively very easy victory in getting local money out of weapons companies and recreating a semblance of a sense of shame in one of the most shameful things there is, profiting off mass slaughter, and compelling public governments and employees and retired teachers who did a good job for decades to profit from mass slaughter. I work for an organization called Roots Action that's at rootsaction.org, and it does some electoral work, unlike World Beyond War, which is a C3 nonprofit in the US and does not. And Roots Action wanted to be like other progressive groups, support the candidates with all the progressive positions on all the topics, but also peace. There's all these progressives except for peace groups. Well, it turns out there's also mostly progressive except for peace candidates. We looked at, the Democratic parties in the US campaign websites in 2020, And 22% of them didn't have any platform, just a face and a story and their kids and, vote for me, I'm not the other guy. But 71% of them had no foreign policy. And so we created a primer, we created a website and a PDF that you can take and give to candidates because their excuse for having no foreign policy is, honestly or not, is very often that they don't know anything about foreign policy. And so you have to tell them. And when you tell them, you can tell them that militarism is the majority of the money that they're applying for the job of overseeing. The discretionary spending, the spending that Congress decides what to do with each year for many, many years, the majority of it has been one and only one little program. The military, often 60% of the job they're applying for, so they're applying for 40% of the job. This is, very different from from most governments around the world, and certainly from state and local governments in the United States. So I stuck a little message at the bottom here when we were talking earlier, in case you put in the back of your mind to donate to New Jersey Peace Action after I was done talking. I'm almost done talking. So don't forget that. And then I want to end with this video that I can't get to play from here, so I'm going to play it from here.
Say no to war. To war. Why are we fighting? Stop the fighting. Pull the trigger, kill each other. Where is the love? Politician, Mr. Preacher Man, show us the light. People fighting, dying, you're watching like it's a movie. But why? Blood is flowing, staining the righteousness of our hearts. Oh, why? Hearts are heartless, souls are soulless, life is lifeless, full of emptiness. This is madness, where's your conscience? No to war, say no to war. Hey mama, hey. No to war, hey mama, hey. Why are we fighting? Hey mama, hey. Stop the fighting. Hey mama, hey. Is it the money or show of might? Have mercy, please. Is it religion? Race, we all human race, sons and daughters of Mother Earth. Let's not disgrace our mama. You're my brother, sister, cousin. You're my neighbor, my friend. We have our differences, sort out the differences in peaceful ways. Respect each other, love one another. Unite and say no to war. Hey mama, hey. No to war. Hey mama, hey. Why are we fighting? Hey mama, hey. Stop the fighting. Hey mama, hey. If you stand up for peace, let me hear you say yeah, 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 yeah. If you stand up for peace, let me hear you say yeah, 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 yeah. Dembe, amani, peace, salam, hey, pashi, paz, balusi, friad, fridan, frida, shanti, iwa. king. Young wife, live every peace. Say no to war. In my way, no to war. In my way, why are we fighting? In my way, stop the fighting. In my way, say no to war. In my way, no to war. In my way, why are we fighting? In my way, stop the fighting. In my way.
Thank you. Questions?
Okay, I will leave the question and answer, David. Unfortunately, we had some technical problem. I don't think you clicked on your YouTube, so we didn't see that video moving. That's not a problem because we could redo it at the very end of question and answers. We didn't see the video moving. So,
What did you see and why didn't you say anything?
Saw the boy, well, you couldn't hear us. We couldn't be heard over the music, and it was a beautiful song. So we could show it again. Do not worry. And that's part of being on a Zoom meeting. We're not in person, and we can't show you. But the thing I really miss the most about being on a Zoom meeting, David, is usually when we have great speakers who give a fantastic presentation, we have a huge round of applause. And that is certainly something that you would receive. You will hear me, and you could see a few faces on the side there giving that round of applause. That was a wonderful presentation. It was so informative. I'm really happy that you focused a lot on the Ukraine crisis. And I know there are other crises like Yemen, Afghanistan. When we first reached out to you, it was before the war in Ukraine had begun. So it was nice that you incorporated that. We have some questions and answers. My job is to read them and go to you for some enlightened answers. I'll take them as they came. There is Michael Rivas, who says and I think he's talking about one of your slides. I didn't think you talked about presidents, but he says you left out Kennedy in the list of presidents who have threatened nuclear war. And he says, why?
Well, I took my list from Daniel Ellsberg's recent book on the Doomsday Machine, and either I screwed up or Dan screwed up or the questioner is mistaken. I guess would be the possibilities.
And I guess it wasn't something you said, correct? It was on one of your...
Oh, I made some slides with a lot of words, and I didn't read all the words, but I had the text of words on one of the slides listing several U.S. presidents who have privately or publicly threatened nuclear war, and I don't know whether Kennedy should be on that list. I'm sorry to say, I don't know what particular threat the questioner is asking about. But to the best of my memory, he's not been on that list when I've made it before, when Dan Ellsberg has made that list in his book on the Doomsday Machine, etc.
Okay, let's go on. Terry Seuss is asking, what shorthand term would you recommend as a substitute for no-fly zone? In other words, I think she's saying that it sounds nice in no-fly zone. Is there some way that we could refer to it that people could realize that's really an act of war?
I mean, war between nuclear powers would be one. If you want specifically to refer to shooting down airplanes, then shooting down the airplanes of a nuclear armed military this is what we're talking about. I assume most people on this call understand that that no-fly zone is a euphemism, is a propaganda term. It sounds nice. You don't want Russian bombers dropping bombs on innocent children in Ukraine. Who the hell does, right? But for the U.S. to commit to shooting down Russian airplanes is for the U.S. to be even more directly in the war than it is now. That's the concern.
Okay, Nancy Tajani asks, it would appear that Russia's position is that at least southeastern Ukraine, if not all of the country, belongs to Russia. Is there actually a possibility for negotiations?
Why would there not be a possibility for negotiations? Why would the position taken by someone on something prevent negotiations? The fact that Russia's demands offend you viscerally, that you find them so immoral you can barely speak about them, why would that prevent making exactly the demands you want to make of Russia, even being a smart negotiator and making a little bit more than what you actually want in demands for Russia, and then sitting down at the table and negotiating which demands are you going to get, which demands are the other guys going to get, which are going to be put off for 10 years while you refrain from killing each other, and then be decided. I think that the obvious demand for Ukraine to be making in that regard is for elections overseen by authorities acceptable to all sides and held according to the highest standards in Crimea, although everybody knows which way that one will go, but in Crimea, as well as in the regions that were supposed to have autonomy under Minsk too. For Russia, Russia, you shouldn't have a country invade another country and have the right to demand anything. It's outrageous. It's offensive. Of course it is. And you shouldn't reward any country for invading another country and killing its people. There should be no benefits, right? But Russia has most of Russia's demands. It's made for years and months and weeks, not just during the invasion. And it's made them publicly. It's done public diplomacy like Woodrow Wilson pretended he wanted. And Ukraine won't do it. Ukraine won't say what it wants, not even get the hell out and apologize and pay reparations and you get nothing. It won't do it because the belief of, I've spoken with members of the Ukrainian government, and this is what they say publicly, and this is what the US and the US media say. You can't negotiate with monsters. You can't. Of course you can. There aren't any monsters. There are just people who do monstrous things, and you can negotiate with them.
Okay. Michael Rivas, and I don't think this is a question, he's responding to your questioning of Kennedy on that list. He writes, in the October crisis, otherwise known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy said nothing was off the table and was willing to bomb the nuclear weapons of Soviet Union and Cuba. Okay, unless you want to comment on that, I'll go to another question.
Well, I want to just comment that bombing nuclear weapons is not actually exactly the same thing as using nuclear weapons, although it may be a very fine distinction because it's the same as bombing a nuclear power plant with a non-nuclear bomb. But yeah, maybe they may very well be right that Kennedy should be on the list.
Okay. Litzer Binder asks, what can we do as individuals tomorrow regarding the war in Ukraine?
I don't see any reason to wait till tomorrow. I think you should be calling, phoning, faxing, social media, barraging your misrepresentatives in the House and your senators and your local elected officials and every media outlet possible. If you go to worldbeyondwar.org and you click on the big graph there, we have this big graphic at the top that switches between a number of things. Click on the one about Ukraine. We have a page with sample letters to the editor you can take and modify and make them say what you want. We have the same on other issues. But you should be speaking out now to everyone you can. You should be supporting every organization like this one right here that's doing so, and asking everyone you know to ask everyone they know to do the same. No need to wait for tomorrow.
And let me just point out that our national organization, peaceaction.org, has information, policy statement, so that could be done. And I urge, and I know Litsa does this, everyone to come to our vigils and the events that we have. Okay, Brian Lizuski asks, could the Ukraine war also be classified as a quasi-civil war? Read even in a rinky-dink history book, the relation of Ukraine and Russia since the 10th century CE. So is this really just a civil war, I think is.
Well, the problem with that, of course, is that most of the people of Ukraine prior to the war, and even more so during, would not have said they were part of Russia. And so for us as brilliant historians to declare them part of Russia is not exactly small d democratic representation of their rights. You know, there's a history of Ukraine being part of a Russian empire and part of a Soviet empire. And there are people in Ukraine who want to be part of Russia, and a clear majority in Crimea who want to be part of Russia. But most of the first language Russian speaking people in Ukraine wanted to be part of Ukraine, and even more so now want to be part of Ukraine. So I don't like categorizing wars as civil wars in the first place, because it's what the United States does when it goes and attacks some place like Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan or Libya, and fighting breaks out, and they declare it a civil war. It's not our fault. It's those dumb, ignorant people we bombed and armed. And it's what people like professors like Steven Pinker do to declare war almost gone from the planet and peace almost achieved worldwide, and just sit back and do nothing, you stupid peace activists, because peace is coming by Thursday. They categorize wars as civil wars and then categorize civil wars as non-wars. So it's not my favorite thing to categorize.
He did better when he focused on linguistics, I believe.
I actually love his book on linguistics. I think it's excellent, even though it's totally taking down someone who's usually right on politics, Noam Chomsky.
Yes. Okay, let me just remind, go back to that question that Litsa asked, and I know she's one of our most active members. May 1st, which is coming up, we're going to have a table at the Hoboken Street Fair. So that's another activity that we could do to get involved in the war in Ukraine and other places. Let me go. Michael Rivas has a couple other questions, and that's all that remains. And I'm going to give them, there are two, I'll give them both to you, David, at the same time. Can you define the term color revolutions? And can you say more about what the training in nonviolent resistance would look like?
Yes. I mean, I can do my best in very brief form on each of those, which could take hours as well as expertise I don't have. And I would also note that May 7th is the next day that lots of peace groups in the US and around the world have chosen for real world actions everywhere about Ukraine. So when you're tabling on May 1st, you can encourage people on May 7th to get out there and stand on a street corner with a banner or poster or do whatever kind of action can be done, and let all the peace groups know, let the National Peace Action and World Beyond War and Code Pink and UFPJ and all those groups know, and list it as one of the thousands of things happening on that day around the world. The color revolutions are, of course, revolutions that have happened, some of them successful, some not, mostly in Eastern Europe, in places in the former Yugoslavia and Serbia, in places like Ukraine. There was the Orange Revolution that, have been in many cases largely nonviolent, and so have demonstrated the power of nonviolent action, have in many cases been heavily funded and influenced by the United States, sometimes more secretly, sometimes more proudly proclaimed. Illustrating the influence, never entirely benevolent, of our friends in the US government. The fact is that there's never been a foreign influenced coup or overthrow that hasn't had real people on the ground who weren't paid, who had legitimate grievances, who really wanted that overthrow. And there's never been a government on earth that didn't merit being overthrown. But the problem is the foreign influence. The people in Russia remember the U.S. bragging about giving them Boris Yeltsin, and people in Ukraine are well aware that the United States has backed one candidate and one side and one party, and Russia the other, for decades now, with both of them trying to manipulate and take power. And the various accusations, including around the Orange Revolution, of Russia poisoning candidates and so forth, that we don't know for sure if they're true, but they're not beyond things that the Russian government would do. And then, of course, in 2014, some years later, the United States phone call being made public, or top State Department officials are talking about who they want to install to lead the U.S., to lead the Ukrainian government, and effectively doing that, this time through a coup that was not entirely nonviolent. And so there's good and bad to be found in many of these things. That nonviolence, like violence, is a tool that can be used for better or worse. I don't think violence can ever be justified, but its motivations and causes can be better or worse. Same with nonviolence. But when you talk about training people to do nonviolence, educating the public of a nation to do unarmed civilian resistance to an invasion, as some countries' governments to some extent have done, including in nearby places like Lithuania, you're talking about something that costs virtually nothing compared to a military budget, that has a record of success that outstrips the use of violence, and is not going to generate coups for powerful interests within your country. A military is more likely to do that. So there's no reason not to be doing it. And groups like Nonviolent Peace Force and Christian peace teams and groups that do unarmed civilian protection and de-escalation in war zones have an incredible success rate in comparison and cost efficiency in comparison to so-called peacekeepers, that is armed UN troops in keeping the peace and de-escalating. And, we love to scream about follow the science, and don't deny climate change science, but we're almost required by public discourse and debate and media coverage to bury the science, to bury what's known about the power of nonviolent action, and to not have a plan in the US government for unarmed civilian protection, to not train people around the world in nonviolence unless it's to overthrow a particular ruler that the US wants overthrown. So, there's a great deal of hypocrisy, and there's a U.S. Institute of Peace that has yet to oppose a U.S. war or to do much in the way of advancing the alternatives of nonviolence. So we have a ways to go.
You mentioned the singing revolution, David, and that we should find it. Where would we find it? Can we go to our local movie theater, or is there some other way?
If you search on the old internet for the Singing Revolution, you will find, you'll find Wikipedia pages and so forth describing what the Singing Revolution was. You'll also find singingrevolution.com. So leave off the just singingrevolution.com. And it looks like you can watch it there for $4. There must be ways to watch it for free, but you're going to be as fast as I am in figuring out what they are.
Okay, because we want our members to give that $4 and other money they have to us at New Jersey Peace Action, so that we can continue this good work. Now we're going to put in the chat about the meeting afterwards. There's a meeting where everyone could speak. I think it's right there now. And that is where you could go to our members who want to be more active. And I hope that that's a lot of you can go and take part. I think that also, David, you put where we could watch the video that we had the technical difficulty with. In the chat. Is that right?
I did, yeah, and I did show it on YouTube, so showing it now on YouTube wouldn't do a darn but it good.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to conclude this part of the meeting. It was great hearing from you, great hearing you answer the questions in your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, David Swanson. You're not going to hear much of it other than from me, but we're going to give you another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
While I have the privilege of being able to speak, I want to also congratulate Veterans for Peace and Johnny Keene for getting these awards. It was well-deserved. Congratulations. And I believe now we will move on to the Raffle Prize.
All right, so we have all the people who purchased the ticket entered into this nice looking circle. I'm going to click the button and the random generator program will pick the winner. And
the winner is, should I say, you want to say it?
No, go ahead.
Paula Rogovin. Paula, congratulations. You're going to have a wonderful time up there in New Hampshire at the World Fellowship. And I've heard from many people it's spectacular. So enjoy it and let us know. It's a trip for two up there for a weekend. So And we have some very progressive minded people up there. So that's wonderful. I want to thank everyone who took part in this raffle. Remember, this was given us by the World Fellowship and as a gift, and we were able to make money for New Jersey Peace Action based on it, which is a wonderful thing. Once again, remember to go to that link to hear about more ways to help New Jersey Peace Action. Go to the other link to see the video from YouTube. I am not sure, am I the one to say goodbye to everyone? No. Judith Arnold, our president, our esteemed president, has something to say, and I'll turn it over to her.
Not much to say. I think David Swanson said it all magnificently. I'm just wrapping it up, and I want to thank you all for being with us and congratulate Paula, although apparently she didn't join us today. We will let her know. And it was just marvelous. It was just a wonderful afternoon. And we hope to see more of you people, of our supporters at our events. We have committees you can join. We have activities we'd love to have you share with us. And you can get in touch with me. I'm at Judith Arnold at njpeaceaction.org. I'd love to hear from you. I would love to see you volunteer. Repeating once again, we would love to have you donate. Thank you so much, and hope to see you live in the fall. Goodbye, everybody.